so much for your patience. I think we've given it a couple of minutes. Hopefully, we'll continue to see folks coming in. Thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate you spending some time with me on this wonderful topic of AR prioritization. I know that there are. I took a look at the list. So many friendly faces. Thank you so much for attending, and some new folks as well. Thank you for joining us. By way of introductions, my name is Andrew Shu. I'm co-founder and managing partner here at Spotlight AR. Wanted to give a little bit of background on, for those of you who are new names, a little bit information on Spotlight. So, Spotlight Analyst Relations, we are a dedicated analyst relations firm. We were founded in 2012, so we've been in business for a little bit over 6.5 years, or just at about. We're about 30 of us here in Kansas City, headquartered here in the Midwest of the United States. We're serving currently 50 global customers, but in the 6.5 years that we have been in business, we've had the incredible honor of running over 100 AR programs, managing thousands of interactions, hundreds and hundreds of Wave Magic Quadrant pursuits. So it has been an amazing learning experience. For a little bit of background, my business partner, Rick Nash, and I are both from the management consulting world. So as part of that overall effort and that level of practice, our area of expertise is actually sort of methodology development, right? So learning how to do something, writing that down and codifying it, and then ultimately trying to improve on that day after day. So what we wanted to do is take an opportunity to share some of those learnings back out to the overall the AR community. So that's this very first part of this webinar series. Thematically speaking, I think that we want to just focus on how do we all get better together, right? I mean, it's analyst relations can be a little bit of a lonely practice. It is hard for us to sometimes find each other, and it'd be fantastic if we could all continue to find forums. And certainly this isn't the only one, but to contribute back from a methodology perspective, so we can figure out how we can all to improve and push our analyst relations programs to the next level of sophistication. So, with that in mind, this is the first in the series. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Today, the topic is prioritization. So this is often the first topic that comes to mind, and one that's near and dear to heart, right? It's an important one, and certainly we aren't the only ones covering it. There are some wonderful thought leadership pieces out there. I just saw one coming out from Dunkley Chapel at Kia. It's got a wonderful blog post out there that's definitely worth reading as well. But let's talk about why it matters. So first and foremost, as you guys know, there are often many analysts that cover us and our competitors, right? So this is often a challenge of not enough resources and too many opportunities to engage. Now, we're in the practice of AR, so we know that every relationship is an opportunity. There's so much to learn and so many people who can help us with our business. But here's the challenge. Every relationship is also potentially a waste of precious resources, especially if we line it wrong. Our most critical relationships that we pick have to be built and sustained over time. There's no drop in the bucket here. There's no moment in time that we have to do this. If that person matters, they have to be sustained over time. And those most important relationships, they require meaningful attention, right? Substantial attention from our most influential and scarce voices. These are the leaders of our firms that are expensive and difficult to get their time. So prioritization has to be done because, in this type of environment, AR leaders, we must fight for resources and defend our choices, right? This is why when we were talking about prioritization, it does not live alone. Prioritization is only the picking of who we care about, but it's even more so about the allocating of our resources and then the justification of our actions, our decisions. So let's talk about that. That's sort of the topic today. So today, what we wanted to do is hopefully provide a thought model and a prioritization tool that will hopefully help those on the phone today validate your instincts, maybe refine your instincts, right? You have a sense of who's important, but maybe we'll add a new layer in here that will advance your thinking. And hopefully this thought model and this prioritization tool will also help justify your decision. So give you a logical and defensible way of position from which you can argue for resources. So that's sort of what we're trying to accomplish today. And let's talk about why, right? We talked a little bit about why prioritization is so important, but let's talk about sort of effort distribution. When we walk into our new clients and we start taking a look at their statistics and their data, what we typically find is a relatively distributed scatter chart. And over here, you talk about the correlation between amount of interactions and level of analyst influence. It's typically a tenuous connection. And what we're really trying to do is find a model and find a prioritization methodology that allows us to disproportionately allocate time. We're talking about a clear bifurcation of those that are most important to us and the amount of time that we spend with them. So, what we're trying to do is move from this left side version of a chart to the right side version of a chart, right? Talk about disproportionately allocating time. So, our philosophy here at Spotlight about prioritization is relatively straightforward. It is that we need to make smart, big bets, right? That's our objective, make smart, big bets. Now, I think the next follow-up question seems to be relatively straightforward and makes sense, which is, you're probably asking, how do we make smarter bets and what constitutes a big bet, right? How do we make smarter bets and what constitutes a big bet? Today, what our contest hopefully will answer is a little bit of information broken up into two of these categories. How do we make smarter bets, and then how do we make bigger bets? So enough stage setting, let's get into what makes a smart bet, right? How do we make a smarter bet? So first of all, let's take a look at some common rules for analyst prioritization. Now, these should look familiar to you. First and foremost, most influential in the marketplace, right? These are people who have a voice that is heard within the marketplace that I care about. They must be aligned with the prospects and customers. They're out there counseling and speaking and writing to the people that we serve today and the people that we want. They are knowledgeable about our markets, our categories, our products. They know our buyers. And frankly, they're often very knowledgeable about our competition, right? These are the people that we care about. We also care about the people who are negative about my brand in the marketplace. Unfortunately for us, the concept of a detractor is just too real. And for us, that is something that makes them just as important for them to manage as our biggest fans. So in short, I think we're all comfortable with these are the folks who know my industry and talk to my people, right? These are the standard, normal analyst prioritization rules I think that we're comfortable with. Now, let's talk about a way that we can get better, right? How do we get better and push it forward more? The oft-forgotten rule that we sometimes find is this idea about business goal alignment. If you take a look at this little Venn diagram-y thing that I have here, on the left-hand side, what we typically find is analyst attributes, okay? These are the descriptors that are inherent to an analyst. We're talking about, is that analyst influential? Is that analyst knowledgeable? Does that analyst talk to my competitors, and do they talk to my customers? Like this is what we typically find. So when many of our clients, when we first start engaging with them, what we find is analyst relations pros doing God's work. We're talking about following best practices, doing their best. They're evaluating analysts, and they are just running the very best AR best practice program that they can. But what sometimes gets lost is this business alignment issue that we have on the right-hand side. It's this idea that I must also take a look at, when I look at analyst relations, who are the analysts that are most influential to what we're trying to accomplish as a company right now? So we're talking about not just the inherent attributes of the analyst, but that business timeliness, right? It's about the business context that makes alignment and prioritization really valuable. So we see the left often when we have experienced AR pros, but when we get busy or when we sometimes don't have enough integration with the business, we see that right side disappear. Improved prioritization is bringing that right side into clear focus. So let's talk about business alignment. There are, first and foremost, some common AR objectives, right? We're all familiar with these. So first and foremost, lead generation. We're talking about having analyst advocates who will make referrals. Those are fantastic. And I know that we all hold them near and dear to our heart. We're talking about market fame and we're talking about shaping opinion, right? We're talking about finding analysts in the community that can help us establish or elevate a perception of a specific differentiator, something that makes us awesome. We're talking about optimized offerings. How do I lean on the analyst community to better differentiate against my competitors? Help us refine our product roadmaps. Help us understand the evolving needs of our buyers, right? We're talking about optimizing our offerings. We're talking about maximizing visibility. This is about winning our share of voice. How do I get into all the syndicated research that's out there so that when analysts are writing about the things that we care about, that we're showing up as well? And then finally, sales support. How can I flood the sales and support the sales team with analyst quotes, analyst relationships, syndicated research, and things of that sort that help overcome buyer hesitation, right? So lead generation, shaping opinions, optimizing offerings, maximizing visibility, sales support. I think we're comfortable with this. And frankly, I think that many of you are asking on the phone right now, like, shouldn't a fully functioning, mature analyst relations program do all of these things? Well, sure. But I think that the question here today is prioritization, right? This is about picking which one of these AR objectives is most important. So I just want to go ahead and just leave that for right now. And I want to talk a little bit about analyst attributes, because that's the other side of the equation too. So first and foremost, the most important thing is always audience targeting. And I think that makes sense. The analyst only matters. Are they counseling or are they writing to the customers that I have and the prospects that I want, right? That's like first and foremost. Then ranking evaluations. Does that analyst write a waiver and Magic Quadrant? Can they establish in a very formal way a differentiator, strength, and a caution? Is that analyst famous within the market that I want to go to? So we're talking about a good indication here is that analysts being invited to speak at the industry events that we attend and we sponsor. So we're looking for fame. Is that analyst being quoted and cited in media that speaks to my audience? Life cycle. This is a little bit more nuanced, but this is where that analyst is within their learning cycle. So is this a new analyst who is currently hungry to learn or to shape or to build or change their mind about a category? Or has the analyst been in that industry for a long time? And frankly, they might have just made up their mind, right? Their worldview is relatively set. Knowledge. Obviously, all analysts know about their industry, but I think there are varying degrees of understanding of the history, right? We're talking about knowledge for us is how much history does that analyst have? How much in-depth knowledge does it have about the different players? How does the industry and the category shaped over time and the different players that have been in that space? Distribution. Does the analyst work in an environment or for a company that has a large amount of readership? If they do not, obviously you can still get it out there through your marketing efforts, but then you're carrying the load, right? So targeting all the way through distribution. There are a few other attributes that we have to care about. So things like research influence. Is the analyst influential not only to their own research, but the research of their peers? At Forrester, you're talking about research directors. At Gartner, you're talking about agenda managers, right? Those people have extra influence. Personality. Is this person a dynamic, outgoing person who's remarkable at selling a story or selling an idea into the marketplace? Or is this person introverted, super smart, and a remarkable digester of information and a writer of amazing research? Sometimes those are not the same people, right? We need to use them differently. And finally, like-mindedness. Does this analyst fundamentally see the world and my category the same way we do, right? We're talking about, do we have a religious a disagreement about the way that our marketplace and the way that our product ultimately is viewed in the market? So let's talk about like-mindedness for a moment, because I think that's a powerful one, especially for those of us on the phone. When we're engaging a new executive or a new speaker, like-mindedness matters. There's nothing so invigorating and enjoyable as getting a new speaker on the phone with an analyst that fundamentally sees the world the same way. If you're trying to bring a new speaker or a new executive into the fold of your analyst relations program, this score of like-mindedness is actually a remarkably important thing, right? You don't want to have your new speaker start a fight on their first call. So I'm sure you guys have all had that happen before, just something for us to pick at. So took a look at goals of AR objectives and analyst attributes, but the question for us is, which AR objectives are more important and which analyst attributes are more important, right? This is about prioritization. We're about picking here. So let's take a look at those. I think for us to, I thought a best way to share this might be just going through an example, right? So specifically, I think that often many of us are trying to face together. So this is idea of how do I establish a differentiator in the marketplace? How do I win third-party support for one of my core claims? Start by identifying your pressing business challenge. This is about tying to the business. So our sales team faces prospects that are skeptical of our scale advantage. You'll hear your technologists talk to you about it. You'll hear your leaders talk to you about it, and they'll be, hey, listen, we've made huge investments in scale. Look at how amazing we are. Look at how much the numbers we have. Well, frankly, our sales guys go out there, and our prospects don't believe it, right? That's the pressing challenge that we have in play. If you look at solving that problem, and you take a look at the AR objectives and which one's the most important, what we're looking at is, hey, shaping opinion. I am looking to lean on the analyst community, I'm looking for an expert to help me validate or to elevate this perception that I have this specific differentiator, right? I'm looking for somebody to help me say it rather than me saying it. So let's go to the next step. If shaping opinion, market fame is the most important thing, you're talking about analyst attributes, you're talking about ranking evaluations. You're talking about the increased importance of somebody who is writing a wave or a magic quadrant. They're writing a piece of research which they are distinctly and deliberately making a declarative call about your strengths and cautions. This is remarkably increased in importance. You're looking for increased distribution, right? You're overweighting distribution. Somebody who already has a readership where many of your buyers and prospects are going to see the fact that you have this particular strength, right? It's going to become word of mouth. Maybe against instinct, you're talking about sub-optimizing a little bit this idea of the sort of historical knowledge. You don't necessarily need somebody who has a huge worldview knowledge about the industry and the history and how it's evolved over time. So you might ask yourself, Andrew, that seems silly, right? Of course, ranking valuations are important. Of course, distribution important. But if we change that business goal on the left-hand side, let's say we're starting to lose our way regarding our overall roadmap and the fact that we're having problems with product finding the right answer, if you make that roadmap the far left side, you can see that your AR objective is going to change. You're definitely not going to be looking for somebody who is out there pushing ranking evaluations distribution, right? You're looking for a totally different analyst profile. So this is just one example, but it is identify the pressing challenge, pick the AR objective that matters the most, use that to adjust the weighting of your attributes. So that feeds into overall prioritization phases, right? How do I go about this? First and foremost, objective alignment always matters. That's always phase 0. What is my business trying to accomplish and how am I going to support it? Phase 1 is discovery. This is going out there and doing the research. Who are the analysts that you might care about, will care about, and what are their relative attributes, right? Are they famous? Do they write for your community and prospects? Do they have great distribution? Phase 2 is about ranking and tiering. This is about finding the relative weights between them, right? Who's the most important all the way to the least important, and then tiering them. How will they actually be treated differently? I'll talk a little bit about that moving forward. And then phase 3 is allocation. Nothing matters on the tiering side if you're not treating them or allocating your resources differently, right? We talked a little bit about this being the priority being the number one thing about priorities, about disproportionately allocating resources. So input, what do I know about my analyst and who are they and what are their attributes, right? What are their ranking and tiering? What is my weighting and what is my output? And then finally, allocation. This is about getting to work and putting forth action. So simple model, but we like to think of it this way. It's the way that we think about it. And we are going to provide a tool, so a prioritization tool. After this call, you'll see an email from me. And in that email will be a link to download this prioritization tool. You're going to see a few tabs in there. There are 3 primary work tabs and 1 instruction tab. They'll go through how do I use it. The first one is the Discover tab. This will allow you to put in the different analysts and then put in all your assigned sort of attributes that are in there. Now, you might say, why isn't there like a standard set of attributes? Well, I think that's completely company dependent, right? Is that analyst a 5 for you on your audience alignment? They might not be 5 for somebody else, right? Sure. So this is your homework tab. This is the input. The second tab is weighting. We have included some standard out-of-the-box recommended weightings. By selecting each most important AR objective, like lead generation and maximize visibility, we've taken a stab at weighting it, but there's also a custom weighting element where you can go in and change what's most important to you. And then finally, there's a tab that dynamically updates and ranks from 1 to X, whatever those number of analysts that you have, and then sorts them into the first 5, second 10, and then the rest. It'll update in real time as you continue to change and play around with the different weightings. And hopefully it'll be a nice way for you to just to test out, right? Try the different weightings, see what's most important to your firm, change out the different rankings, and see how your analysts change. So you'll see this prioritization tool be made available to you. Now, we keep using the word like tiering, ranking, tiering. So just as a point of clarification, what are we talking about, right? What does it mean to move from ranking to tiering? So ranking is a relative importance measure, right? So this is the most important analyst to me and to the least important analyst based on the attributes and based on my weighting. That's straightforward. Over to the right is tiering. That is, now that I know who's most important to least important, how am I going to treat them differently? How am I going to allocate resources differently? In this particular case, I've just used 1 through 5 in tier 1, 6 through 10 in tier 2, and then the rest in tier 3. Tier 1 could be white glove service, right? Like flat out anything you need. Tier 2 can be, what can I do for you? I might not be like actively reaching out, but what I will do is respond to any ask that you have. And tier 3, I can put you on the list, right? I'll make sure that you're available. You get all the product updates from us. Straightforward, but this is the ranking to tiering and how they're used differently. One is relative weighting. The other one's how am I going to treat you differently? So let's talk about a sample tiering model. Just want to provide you with one that's in here. This is also available in the instruction of the worksheet. So if you forget if you need another example of tiering. This is about defining objectives. This is about defining what your tiering is, and it's about setting your speakers and strategy. So as an example, in this one on the left-hand side, tier 1, right? Of course, these are analysts that are most impactful to our primary business objective. That's our definition. The objective here is to build the relationship or that your firm absolutely needs. Those are important. The speakers are most powerful and influential voices, right? So these are the people that are our C-suite, the product strategy. And then finally, the strategy here is that we have a responsibility for building a consistent relationship. So consistent matters to win advocates and to shape our category. These are most important. That's our strategy. So tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Take a look at it. I'm sure that each one of you probably has some version of this, but this is the way that we try to define and categorize it. So that takes us through how do I make a smart bet, right? All the way from aligning the business objectives all the way through allocation. Now, how big is a big bet? Let's spend just a little bit of time talking about that. So first and foremost, let's talk about typical AR resource allocation, right? You say, hey, you said disproportionately allocate. That could mean anything. What does that mean? Let's talk a little bit about how disproportionate does it have to be. These are some best practices that we think are good guidelines. They don't have to be the way you treat it, but I think they might come in useful. First category is time allocation, right? Here you'll see that the C-suite is 70% aligned and the AR is 50% time aligned. You might go, hey, if it's so important, why isn't like 70% AR team aligned? I think it's because the AR team has other responsibilities. You don't want to spend too much of a C-suite time anywhere else but on your core. Sometimes you might bring them in to tier 2 or tier 3 based on if they have a relationship or it's a quick win that you can have. But your AR team will have to manage those other relationships. So you'll see that time allocation is different. Budget-wise, it becomes even more less justified. We're talking about travel time. We're talking about resource subscriptions. We're talking about advisory. It is heavily weighted left-hand side. You may allocate a little bit to tier 2, but that is not your focus. But maybe most dramatically is your client references, right? Those are the clients that you love that are sitting in your cabs, that say nice things about you, that you use in your Wave and MQ references. Our recommendation is don't spend one single iota of the time when they're not talking to your tier 1. That's 100% allocation to the left side. This is about definitively picking and only spending your most important client references on the people that you care about the most. So it continues to get from top to bottom even further left justified, right? This is our histogram. This is everything on the left-hand side. This is your typical AR resource allocation. So it's difficult. I'm telling you, I'm sure you guys have all dealt with this. Like, how do I get people to pay attention? How do I pick? It's the typical Michael Porter model, right? So this is not what you do, but what you don't do, right? Let's pick what we do. So this is the typical AR resource allocation. So I've said a lot here. Let's review a little bit. How do I apply? So first and foremost, identify your critical business objectives. Go look inside the last business update that your CEO did. Go look in your 10K. Go find the presentation that your sales team did. Go find the critical business objectives that are out there, right? This is an important place to look. Align your AR objectives to the business objectives. Pick the ones that matter the most. Don't pick them all. Don't tell your leadership that you can do everything. Say, I need to do this objective to support that critical business objective. Discover and rate your analysts across attributes. Do your homework. Go, and many of you already have this information. I bet if you just put it into the spreadsheet, try it out, document it, codify it, change it over time, put it into that spreadsheet. I think it'll be eye-opening. Tier your analysts based on your weighted ranking. So change your weightings, tier your analysts, and then allocate your resources disproportionately, right? Spend the time and write down your tiering, set the rules, communicate that. Set the rules, and then finally, go sell your bet, right? Go justify this new smart big bet. Tell them that it's aligned to the business objective. Tell them what it's going to do for the business. Go make your ask, right? Show them how everything is tied from the front all the way to the back. So that's sort of the application model. Now, as part of this email that I'll send out, I'm also going to make available an example executive sell-in presentation, right? Some of this material will sound familiar, but there'll be a little section of business alignment. How do I have goals, and then how do I align? There'll be a little section on analyst tiering. What are my tiers, and who are my tier ones, and who's going to be aligned from a speakership perspective? And then finally, asks of leadership. What am I going to actually ask of you, right? So specific asks. So, that was a lot of information. Sorry for going so fast. Let's talk about in closing. First and foremost, I think you're going to find if you do this, the alignment to the business makes prioritization much easier and justification even more easier. This is important, right? This is. I think the technique really works. Keep your eyes open. The smart bets will keep on moving. Obviously, the things that your business is struggling with right now is going to change, and the objectives and goals of your business are going to change. So you have to keep your eyes open. And then honestly, you guys know this, your analysts change. They quit, they change their research, they change categories. You might say to yourself, wow, this seems like a lot of hard work. Rechanging and retiering is tough. Well, folks, I call that job security, right? That's important. And then don't forget integration and activation. None of what we do matters if product doesn't change what they prioritize based on the things we learn. If marketing doesn't activate and actually market the outcome that we get, and sales isn't armed with those quippy little phrases and the data and the references to differentiators that have been validated by third party. Product, marketing, sales. If you're not integrated and activated with them, we are not doing our job. And then finally, please watch out for a follow-up email. I know that the email will have the tools in there with the next webinar, but there'll also be a little bit of a survey in there. If you wouldn't be so kind and fill that out. Let us know if this was valuable. Let us know if this was too academic, if this was too mechanical. And then also, I'd love to just get a little bit of, there's a little open text box in there. You can provide a little bit of information on what topics you want to talk about next. So I'd be happy to chat about. So I think, let me go ahead and pause. We're at the 12:30 mark. Thank you so much for attending. I really appreciate it. I know that many of you have to leave, but for those of you who can stay, if I'm looking at the question component, there's a few questions. For those of you who can stay, I'm just going to take a few moments and answer these. So first and foremost, I see Anonymous asked, what do you do when a tier 2 or tier 3 has a survey and requires 5 to 7 references per geo? So what do you just say no? Oh, that's a great question, right? So what happens if you have a tier 2 and a new survey? So the survey, I presume, goes to a market guide, right? If you're probably looking for somebody trying to fill out a vendor landscape, something like that. Honestly, you have to say no, right? I think that you have to look at it really, really carefully. I think vendor landscapes are a fantastic way to get onto the into the world, and it's great for maximizing visibility. And it's important that you're known as that out there. But I think 5 to 7's a little bit unreasonable, right? I think that frankly, using up your chip there is hard. I think that it makes it difficult for you to go back to your client reference team, your sales team, and ask for it again later when you really need it. And it makes it feel like you can't prioritize. Sometimes We can go back and ask and beg the analyst for a few fewer of them. I'm sure that some of us have done that. And then maybe even asking the analyst to go to another team that just did it, so they can get some of the reference data from another team that can come into play as well, like looking for a peer team. But my recommendation, yes, I think that if it's tier 2 or tier 3, is to unfortunately say to beg out. So another question that we have here is for your tier 1, how many seats do you need to buy? Does just the AR person hold it? How do you buy the seats for the product team, sales, and sales leaders? So a tier 1, how many seats do you need to buy? That's probably a budgetary allocation question. It sounds like we may need to have an entire session on this. So many of us AR pros are probably sitting on something called like a work group seat at Gartner, right? I think that the allocation of seats to the AR team is a really tough question to ask. For tier 1, it is about having your primary speaker have the seat, right? I don't think it's necessarily, I find it actually to be a diminishing return to have multiple people and multiple speakers, multiple leaders, and multiple AR people aligned to the same analyst. I think it's about buying the least number of seats that gets you to be able to be on that call, and that the speaker has the highest amount of touch so they can reach and talk to that analyst as often as possible, right? So I think that's the way you should think about it. It is about efficiency and efficacy of the number of seats that you have to buy. And we can talk a little bit more. I know that's a tough question. Another question answers questions like waves and MQs when referring to ranking reports. Where does the IDC MarketScape fit from a prioritization standpoint, if at all? Sometimes the IDC MarketScape really matters. So what I didn't cover was there are many, and I would never call IDC narrow, right? But IDC does have coverage in a couple of areas where Forrester and Gartner do not. Where they have strong and they are not finding enough coverage at Forrester and Gartner, I think that makes perfect sense to make it a number 1, right? Make it important. You'll also find smaller firms. So let's say, for instance, you're within the local marketing space and that's BIA Kelsey. You're in the consulting space and this Kennedy, right? If you are narrowly focused and there is a specific ranking that's done by a smaller company, that can still make you number 1, right? You can still elevate that to the top. But you have to rethink about it. If it's a smaller company, you have to allocate budget and resources for distribution. So let's talk about the next question. It says, how do you know if tier 1 analysts are talking to their customers about you? It's a great question. So different analyst firms do this differently. So if you, and pardon me, I'm just gonna take a drink of water. If you take a look at the great way to get that answer is talk to your analyst, right? I think that one thing that us AR pros sometimes are afraid to do is ask. When I first got into this business, I really, and not unfairly, I held the analysts in remarkably important light, and I was very, very cautious about the things I'd ask them. I was always scared of undue influence. I was always trying to be fair and reasonable about my questions. Some of the analysts just don't mind. They will just simply tell you, hey, listen, these are the people that I'm talking to, these are the prospects, and I mentioned you. There's smart ways to ask that question, of course. Maybe what we can do is talk about analyst perception surveys on another call, and I can cover some of those different techniques and how to avoid those questions. And then also never be afraid to use your salesperson, your account person at Forrester and Gartner or any other research firm. Ask them, make them do research, make them find out whether if you're paying them money, their job is to tell you stuff, right? Go find out how many inquiries come in and how often your name is mentioned. Next question, you make allocating budget heavily to tier 1 analysts. What are the benefits of doing that? Pay to play is limited at top firms. Which budget? Oh man, tough question. So great question from Duncan. I would expect nothing less from you. So the question is, if it's about allocating budget heavily to tier 1, what are the benefits of doing that? So you're absolutely right. Pay to play is so limited. So many of our new clients come in and ask me, right, if I have isn't this just pay to play? If you walk into Forrester with $1 million and you tell them to create the category and put you first, you will absolutely lose. There's nothing that you're going to win with that, right? But what you can do is say, hey, can I use that resources to spend time with you? I think it is even more important to spend the time. I think that we sometimes lean too heavily on our inquiry and our briefing calls. Excuse me, pardon me. To try to solve the entirety of our storytelling. We try to use those calls to do everything that we need to deliver the entirety of our message. I think that spending the time is what matters. If you're looking at allocating resources, it's about allocating time and dollars to get the analyst time to pay attention to them. So I think those are the SaaS budgets are where you should be spending on that, right? So should there be market intelligence budget be allocated that way? Think that for sure, right? If it's an analyst with the knowledge and you're spending time influencing them, what's going to inevitably happen if you've got a productive relationship, if you're doing a two-way relationship that's really beneficial, it has to be both ways, right? You're going to learn something about the market. You're going to learn something about your buyers. You're going to learn something about your competitors. If market intel can throw in here, they should do that. We all have product groups that have a competitive intel group that has research dollars, right? Go get those dollars, go get their questions, and go get it integrated into your SaaS. So I think I've kept you all for long enough. This was hopefully valuable. I felt like I ran super fast. Maybe in the follow-up too, if you guys want to send me an email, let me know if 30 minutes was too short. If you guys want to actually allocate an hour, I'd be happy to put together the content if that is preferred by this audience. So in that, thank you so much for attending the first version of this webinar. I'm so thankful for all of you who have attended. Look for my email that comes out, and hopefully this isn't just once, and hopefully we can build this relationship moving forward, and we can keep the dialogue going, and we can all get better. So thank you.